Macau says he has always suspected that his wife was having an affair and had warned her lover over the phone several times. But it was not until that fateful Friday, the 30th of March, when he was tipped off by one of his friends as to the whereabouts of his wife and the company she was keeping.
Shock, disbelief and questions as Kapkwen villagers mill around the home of popular musician Diana Chelele, known as Chelele. News of her death spread in the village quickly like bushfire, sending hundreds of villagers to her house. Chelele was found lying dead in a pool of blood. She is believed to have died of stabbing wounds.
You may not have heard about this case, but it gives us a grim lesson in the dangers of abusive relationships and the hard truth that they really get better with time.
Welcome to Silent Shadows. As always, if you appreciate our true crime storytelling, support our work by liking and subscribing. Together we uncover compelling tales of crimes and mysteries in Kenya and beyond, presenting well-balanced narratives that respect the victims and their loved ones.
Diana Chelele, popularly known as Chelele, was born in 1988 in Bomet County. She was the firstborn in a family of 5 children, born to Juliana and Paul Rono. From her childhood, Chelele was a talented musician. This was evident when she joined Jerian Primary School in Bomet, and she was selected by her teachers and peers to lead music performances, including in various music competitions, both in the county and nationally. After completing her primary school education, Chelele joined Chebonai Girls High School, where she continued to nurture her singing talent by leading performances during school events and music competitions. She was so passionate about pursuing a career in music that she dropped out of high school in 2005 when she was in Form 3. Her parents and teachers did not push back on her decision to drop out of school because she had already made a name for herself. All that was left was for her to commercialize her talent and make money from it. Additionally, they knew Chelele for not changing her mind once it was made up. So they understood that no matter how much they tried to convince her, it would not happen. After dropping out of school, Chelele focused on writing and recording music. And a few months after leaving school, she released her first album, which had a similar sound to other songs in the Rift Valley region. As a result, it did not stand out, and as much as it was promising, it did not do well. Things took a turn for the better when Chelele, a huge fan of South African music, specifically Yvonne Chaka Chaka and Brenda Fassie, began infusing South African beats into her music using the keyboard. She introduced a unique, fast-paced genre that was unheard of in the region. Consequently, Chelele gained massive popularity and became a household name in Rift Valley and beyond. As her music career took off, Chelele also found love. Just 2 years after dropping out of school to pursue music, Chelele met and fell madly in love with Eric Musila Macau, who was a police officer. Chelele and Musila were so in love that in the same year they met, that is 2007, they began living together as husband and wife, and they would split their time between their house in Utawala, Nairobi, and Kapkwen in Bomet, which was Chelele's hometown. Chelele's star continued to rise as she released more hit songs that were played widely on radio stations, and she performed at nearly every event and roadshow in the Rift Valley region. In 2009, as Chelele's career continued to flourish, her family grew from 2 to 4 when she and her husband welcomed twin daughters, whom they named Sasha and Tasha. Chelele even released a song titled Sasha and Tasha, dedicated to them. This was just one of the many songs in which Chelele featured her young family. Despite them appearing to be a perfect family in her music videos, things were very different behind the scenes. According to those who knew them, especially their family and friends, their marriage was described as toxic and abusive. Chelele and Musila's relationship continued to have its ups and downs through the years, and those who were close to the couple noted that they would often separate and then reconcile. 2011 was particularly a bittersweet year for the couple. On one hand, Musila's discipline and dedication within the police force earned him a promotion to the VIP protection unit. He was assigned to be a bodyguard to Engineer Cyrus Njiru, who was the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Transport at the time. This new role came with additional allowances and perks for Musila. Although things were looking up for Musila at work, the situation at home was far from ideal. To be more specific, he suspected his wife was having an affair with one Yego, a married father of 4 who worked as a surveyor in Eldoret. To try and break off the affair, Musila called Yego multiple times, telling him to stay away from his wife. Things would take a very dark turn on the evening of Friday 30th March 2012. On the said day, Chelele met up with her boyfriend Yego, who had told his family he was traveling to Kisumu for work. Chelele booked a room for them at the CIS Mara guest house in Bomet. A few minutes past 6 p.m., the guest house watchman Kibet arrived for his shift and noticed a black car parked on the premises. As he entered the building, he saw Chelele standing on the veranda. Kibet recognized her not only as a popular musician in the region, but also as a regular patron at the guest house. Kibet and Chelele had a brief chat, as they were well acquainted, and during their conversation, Chelele informed him that she had booked room 6 for her male guest, Yego. She mentioned that her guest was being followed by the police. However, what Chelele failed to disclose to the watchman was the fact that her husband was the one following Yego. Since he knew about the affair and one of his friends who had seen Chelele and Yego together that day had called him to let him know about their clandestine meeting at the guest house. Chelele then asked Kibet to do 2 things. Firstly, alert her and her guest if the police arrived, and secondly, to take some water to her guest in room 6. At around 11 p.m., Musila arrived at the guest house with his friend, who was also a police officer. The 2 policemen approached Kibet, the watchman, and demanded to be taken to the room where Chelele and Yego were staying. However, Kibet declined their request, and he called 3 other staff members for assistance. When the officers produced their identification cards to confirm their status as police officers, Kibet and his colleagues reluctantly agreed to lead them to room 6, where Chelele and Yego were. Upon reaching the room, the officers instructed the staff to leave immediately, and as the workers descended the stairs to return to their workstations, they suddenly heard a commotion coming from the room. So what exactly was happening upstairs during this time? According to Musila, when he entered room 6 and found Chelele with Yego, he told Yego he was arresting him for cheating with his wife. Yes, you heard that right. He told him he was arresting him for cheating. Musila then handcuffed Yego and asked him which police station he would prefer to be taken to. In response, Yego requested to be taken to a police station in Kericho. Musila and his fellow police officer then escorted Chelele and Yego downstairs. They confiscated Yego's car keys, forced him into the backseat of his car, and made Chelele sit in the passenger seat next to the driver. Musila then took the driver's seat and drove away. Interestingly, the second police officer did not accompany them, and when the car left the guest house, only 3 people were on board: Musila, Chelele, and Yego. What's puzzling is the fact that Musila later admitted he did not know the exact directions to the police station Yego had requested to be taken to. Instead, he relied on Yego to guide him. After driving for approximately 45 minutes, they reached Cheplakwet village near the border of Kericho and Bomet counties. At this point, Yego asked Musila to stop the car, and Musila complied, believing they had arrived. When the car stopped, since Musila had not locked the car doors, Yego managed to jump out of the car. In the ensuing commotion, Chelele seized the opportunity and ran away as well. Yego, who was handcuffed with his hands behind his back, was only able to run about 3 meters from the car when he fell. Musila, who was now very annoyed, was behind him, and when Yego was on the ground, Musila shot Yego twice in the head, killing him instantly. To cover his tracks, Musila then tried to burn his body. At daybreak on Saturday 31st March 2012, residents of Cheplakwet village came across a grim scene as they went about their morning routines. Just a few meters from the main road leading to Kericho, they discovered Yego's lifeless body. The villagers quickly informed the local chief, who alerted the police. Upon arriving at the scene, the police found 2 bullet cartridges, a white jerrycan containing kerosene, and a wallet holding Yego's identity card and his wife's business card. The officers contacted Yego's wife to inform her of the tragic event. During the call, she asked whether Yego's car, a black Toyota, had been found. This prompted the police to begin tracing the vehicle as part of the investigation. Yego's body was initially taken to Kapkatet District Mortuary before being transferred to the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret for an autopsy, as the investigators worked to piece together the events surrounding his death. Musila and Chelele shortly thereafter became the primary suspects in Yego's murder after the police interviewed the staff at CIS guest house. And on the night of Thursday, 19th April 2012, Musila was arrested at the Shauri Moyo AP camp. During the arrest, a pistol and his phone, both key pieces of evidence, were recovered by the detectives. The following day, in the early hours of Friday, 20th April 2012, detectives traveled to Musila's country home in Kibwezi. There, they found Yego's car parked in the compound, covered with a black tarpaulin. The car was missing its tires, and further investigation revealed that Musila's brother Dennis was in possession of the car's ignition key. Dennis informed the police that the missing tires were with Chelele. Chelele was subsequently arrested on the same day, Friday, 20th April 2012 in Bomet. As the police interrogated Chelele, they discovered that she had sold the tires belonging to Yego's car to an auto spare parts shop in Makadara. Things took another dramatic turn when Musila provided two conflicting statements regarding the events leading up to Yego's death. In one version he gave to the police, he completely shifted the blame onto his wife Chelele. He claimed that Chelele, a musician, would often hire a vehicle for her performances in different locations, and that his brother would accompany her. He further claimed that on the day Yego was murdered, Chelele had a contract with an international organization to perform in Voi, and that she had hired Yego's car, which had broken down on the way there and had been taken to his home in Kibwezi to be fixed. Musila also told the police that he kept his gun in an inbuilt safe in his house in Utawala, which he shared with his wife Chelele, and only Chelele had access to the gun. So in a nutshell, he was saying Chelele did it. She killed Yego. On the other hand, in an interview with Citizen TV on Saturday, 21st April 2012, Musila confessed to the murder of Yego. His admission was chilling as he showed no remorse for taking Yego's life. He even seemed to justify his actions, stating that every married person should be satisfied with their own home.
Murder, and is not remorseful but still begs for forgiveness from Yego's family.
Watakuja tukutane mahali ndakuwa, na wakitaka kusikia wangu ndawaeleza, na wakitaka wataniamini. Ndio baba yao yuko, but siwezi sema he was a bad dad, lakini mtu atosheke tu na kwake.
Days after their arrest, Musila and Chelele were jointly charged with the murder of Yego. As is their right, they were granted bail, which allowed them to continue with their lives while the case proceeded in court. Once out of remand, Chelele continued releasing songs that made the charts and performing in various shows. Expectedly, 3 years after Musila and Chelele were charged with Yego's murder, their marriage took a turn for the worst. You see, in January of 2015, Chelele released what would be her final album, titled Cheborge, which included popular songs like Shilingi. Despite the album's massive success, the latter part of the year would bring significant turmoil for both her and Musila. To be more precise, on Friday, 2nd October 2015, Chelele performed in Eldoret, and after the performance, she traveled to Nakuru and checked into a hotel. Sadly, while at the hotel, she informed her family and friends that she was contemplating taking her own life due to the ongoing marital and legal struggles she was facing. Chelele was later found unconscious at the hotel by her friends, who rushed her to Nakuru General Hospital. She was admitted and discharged on Sunday, 4th October 2015, and she then went to her parents' home in Bomet to recover. The rain continued to pour down on Chelele, as in the same month, she separated from her husband Musila. According to court documents, Musila was granted full custody of their twins, since he was able to convince the court that he was the more stable parent. This was based on his argument that Chelele frequently partied, was hardly ever home, and was hooked to booze and marijuana. After the separation, Chelele moved out of their house in Utawala and relocated to Bomet, where she alternated between living in her house in Kapkwen in Bomet, which she had built, and staying with her boyfriend Ronald, a fellow musician in Kericho. The two, Chelele and Ronald, had started seeing each other 6 months earlier, around July of 2015. Despite the separation from her husband and her evidently moving on, the relationship between Chelele and Musila would prove to be lethal 3 months after their separation. So on Tuesday, 5th January 2016, Chelele was spending time with Ronald at his house in Kericho when he noticed she had a new phone, on top of the 2 other phones she already owned. Chelele explained that she had bought that phone at Musila's suggestion so they could communicate about returning her belongings and the well-being of their kids. The following day, on the night of Wednesday, 6th January 2016, Chelele was in contact with Musila using her new phone, and he had told her he would be returning some of her belongings that evening when he arrived at Bomet. Ronald warned Chelele against going to meet Musila that night, but she insisted on going, explaining that she was going to meet him at night because she did not want to be seen by many people in Bomet. That evening, Chelele left Ronald's house in Kericho and traveled to Bomet. To kill time while waiting for her estranged husband, she went to the house of her close friend, Faith Chepkurui, a fellow musician who was also her mentor. Chelele got to Faith's house around 8 p.m. and she found Faith and her boyfriend were having dinner, and she joined them. While they were eating, another friend, Damaris, who was also Faith's neighbor, joined them. Interestingly, Damaris and Faith noticed that Chelele was constantly on her phone and would frequently step outside to take calls. Meanwhile, back in Kericho, Ronald was worried about Chelele, and he called her and she reassured him that she was safe and would later be meeting Musila at Club City in Bomet. At around 10 p.m., Faith made a bed for Chelele to sleep in, as the plan was for her to spend the night at Faith's house. However, Chelele said she needed to go out for just 1 hour to meet someone. Since it was cold outside, Faith gave Chelele a Masai shuka and boots to keep her warm. Then Damaris, Faith, and her boyfriend escorted Chelele outside the compound, where she took a boda boda. Sadly, this was the last time they would ever see their friend. Around 11 p.m., Ronald called Chelele again, and she told him that Musila had finally arrived at the club where she was. But, and this is a huge but, we believe that Chelele did not meet her estranged husband Musila at the club, and she intended to meet him at her house. This is because, according to Chelele's neighbor Gladys Chepkemoi, she was on her way home when she saw Chelele running along the road. Gladys claims to have asked the boda boda rider to stop and shine the light towards Chelele. This was when Gladys saw Chelele stop, and then Musila, who had been on the other side of the road, crossed over and hugged her. Gladys was also able to notice that Musila was wearing a V-shaped sweater with white stripes, and Chelele had covered herself with a Masai shuka. What complicated the situation further was when Gladys saw another man join Chelele and Musila. Gladys asserted that this man was wearing a creamy yellow shirt and had come from a dark area across the road near Itembe Secondary School, which is why she didn't notice him earlier. The man allegedly turned on his phone light and shined it toward Gladys and the boda boda rider, shouting at the rider to stop illuminating them. Gladys then watched as the three of them walked toward a hangout joint called Annex. It is important to highlight that Chelele's house was only 200 to 300 meters away from where she met Musila. Around midnight, Ronald, who had a bad feeling about Chelele meeting Musila, tried calling her again, but her phone was off. This remained the case throughout the night. Her friend Damaris also tried reaching out to Chelele, but she too could not get through to her. Let me tell you, the stars really conspired to blow the lid open on Musila's movement that night, because in a chilling development at around 3 a.m., now Thursday 7th January 2016, a lady by the name Rita Chemngeno, who was Chelele's aunt and had known Musila since he got married to Chelele, was in a car traveling from Kericho to Bomet when she saw Musila standing by the roadside at a place called Chebole. She noticed Musila wearing a black trouser and a short-sleeved white shirt with stripes, but no sweater, which was odd considering how chilly it was. According to Rita, Musila appeared to be trying to stop random cars, presumably to try and get a lift. And this caught Rita's attention. Since Rita knew Musila, she asked the driver of the car she was in to stop, but he refused, citing that since it was quite late and the security in the area was very poor, they could not risk stopping. Rita, who was aware of the rocky state of Chelele's marriage, then attempted to call her to inform her that he had seen Musila, but Chelele's phone was off. As morning came, Ronald was super concerned about Chelele, and he visited Damaris in Bomet to check if Chelele was there. When he got to Bomet, Damaris informed him that Chelele had left the previous night and never returned. She added that she had also been unable to reach her on her phone, which only deepened Ronald's worries. Ronald wasn't the only one concerned about Chelele's whereabouts. Her sister Beatrice was equally worried as she hadn't been able to reach Chelele for 2 consecutive days. That is Thursday 7th January 2016 and Friday 8th January 2016. This was highly unusual since Chelele always kept her phone on, given that it was the primary way people contacted her to book her for shows. Chillingly, on Friday 8th January 2016, Musila called Beatrice to ask her why Chelele's phone was off. Obviously, Beatrice told him she didn't know because she hadn't been in contact with Chelele for a couple of days. The following day, Saturday 9th January 2016, Beatrice decided to go to Chelele's house, which was about 2 kilometers away from where she lived. Chelele's house was the only house on the compound. As such, it had its own perimeter fence and gate. When Beatrice entered the compound, this was around 8 a.m., she saw Chelele, who was deceased, on the veranda. Beatrice then raised an alarm calling Chelele's neighbors before going to the Bomet police station to report the matter. When the police got to the house, they noted that Chelele had been stabbed multiple times and there was blood at the gate, which indicated that she was probably stabbed there first and the killer or killers finished the job just outside her house. At the scene of the murder, the police also recovered burnt strips of khaki paper that had bloodstains on them. Chelele's body was then moved to Longisa District Mortuary for preservation. Back in Kericho, after 3 days without any communication from Chelele, Ronald decided to report her as missing at the Kericho police station. While filing the report, he received a devastating call informing him that Chelele was no more. Overwhelmed by the news, Ronald immediately headed to Bomet. Unfortunately, by the time he arrived, Chelele's body had already been taken to the mortuary. The news of Chelele's murder sent shockwaves across the country. Social media was flooded with tributes and local radio stations played her songs throughout the day in her honor. A week after her death, 2 major clues emerged, casting light on who likely killed Chelele. The first clue was a WhatsApp audio message Chelele had sent to someone in her circle. Speaking in her mother tongue, Chelele poured out her pain and described the rocky relationship she had with Musila. In the audio, Chelele detailed years of suffering and manipulation, including how Musila allegedly tortured her emotionally and physically. The second clue was the autopsy report, which revealed that Chelele's death was brutal and personal. She had multiple stab wounds on her neck and stomach, as well as defense wounds on her hands, suggesting that she fought desperately for her life. The brutal manner in which Chelele was killed hinted to the fact that the person who took her life was someone who was known to her. Consequently, Eric Musila Makau became a prime suspect in Chelele's murder. Police arrested him on Wednesday, 13th January 2016 at a hotel in Nakuru where he was hiding. And when the detectives searched his house in Utawala, they discovered a blood-stained sweater, which became a critical piece of evidence. Just 8 days after Musila's arrest, Diana Chelele was laid to rest at her Kapkoen home in Bomet County on Thursday, 21st January 2016. Her emotional send-off was attended by thousands who gathered to mourn the talented musician. She was eulogized as jovial, a gifted artist, and a loving mother to her 2 daughters. While Chelele was being celebrated in her final farewell, her estranged husband, Musila, was facing 2 murder charges. As you can imagine, the legal proceedings were lengthy, so we'll synthesize the most important details for you. In the first murder case, where Musila was accused of killing Yego, the evidence against him was overwhelming. To begin with, the staff at the guest house testified about the incident where Musila had arrested Yego, and Musila's phone records indicated that he had been in contact with Yego on the day of the murder. Additionally, the 2 bullets recovered from Yego's body during the autopsy and the bullet casings found at the crime scene matched the gun Musila had been officially issued on 10th January 2012 for his duties as a bodyguard to Engineer Cyrus Njiru, the then permanent secretary of the Ministry of Transport. The other crucial piece of evidence in the case was the fact that Yego's car was found at Musila's country home. As expected, Musila attempted to distance himself from the murder by claiming that his strict schedule as the PS's bodyguard left him with no days off. He asserted that he would leave home at 4:30 a.m., pick up the PS, and stay with him until 10 p.m. each day. Musila also testified that on the day that Yego was killed, the PS had been involved in meetings in Nairobi, and he had not traveled to Bomet or the Rift Valley region, and Musila was with him in Nairobi during this time. Musila predictably attempted to shift the blame for the murder onto his deceased wife Chelele by rehashing his initial police statement, where he claimed that Chelele had hired Yego's car for a performance she had in Voi, and that she had access to his gun, which was stored in the house they shared in Utawala. On Tuesday, 9th April 2019, 7 years after Musila brutally killed Yego, Justice David Majanja found him guilty of murder. Musila was subsequently sentenced to 30 years in prison for his crime. Now, for Chelele's murder case, which is a classic example of how policemen bungle cases in Kenya. Despite the compelling witness testimonies, including one from the neighbor who saw Musila with Chelele on the night of the murder, and the other relative who saw Musila on the highway at 3 a.m. without his sweater, there were significant gaps in the prosecution's case. One gap was the fact that the police did not recover the murder weapon, the knife used to stab Chelele. Also, and most disappointingly, while the bloody sweater recovered from Musila's house contained DNA that matched Chelele's, there was also unidentified male DNA present. However, the police did not test Musila's DNA against this unidentified male DNA. Furthermore, Musila and Chelele's phone records pointed to the likelihood that Musila did not commit the murder alone, and he had the help from one Anthony Ngare. Although Musila denied knowing Ngare, the evidence suggested otherwise, since Ngare was known to sell cat, locally known as Miraa, near Musila's home in Utawala. There were also very suspicious phone activities between Musila, Chelele, and Ngare. According to phone data presented in court by cyber forensic experts, Ngare had purchased a Safaricom line, registered it in his name, and given it to Musila for him to use. In the days that followed, between 24th December 2015 and that January 2016, Ngare and Musila had 41 phone calls. Even more striking, from 5th January 2016 until the day Chelele was murdered, Ngare and Chelele were in communication 73 times. They called each other 73 times. Let that sink in. Most damningly, the last person Chelele's phone was in contact with before it was switched off, the night she was murdered, was Ngare. Furthermore, the burnt strips of blood-stained khaki paper found at the scene of Chelele's murder were sent for DNA testing. The results revealed that the DNA belonged to an unknown adult male. However, the investigators failed to test this DNA against Musila's and Ngare's. They also did not arrest Ngare or test his DNA against the unknown male DNA found on the sweater. Interestingly, the investigating officer Corporal Mutunga told the court that he suspected the unknown male DNA retrieved from the bloody sweater and burnt khaki paper belonged to Ngare. Yet he did nothing with this hypothesis. He merely mentioned it in court. After both the prosecution and defense had presented their cases, Justice Richard Mongo delivered his ruling on that May 2019, 3 years after Chelele's brutal murder. In his ruling, he stated verbatim, "Despite the court's own suspicions as to the possible coordinating role played by the accused in the murder of his wife, Diana Musila, alias Chelele, I find it that it would be unsafe to convict the accused for murder on the evidence availed by the prosecution. The judge failed to convict Musila for Chelele's murder because the prosecution did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was responsible for her death. There were several lingering questions the court had about the case, including why Anthony Ngare was not questioned or arrested. Also, who was the unknown man whose DNA was found on the bloody sweater and the blood-stained burnt khaki papers? And also, what was the nature of the relationship between Ngare, Musila, and Chelele? The court also questioned who was the mystery man who was seen with Musila and Chelele on the night she was murdered. Was it Ngare or someone else? Due to the numerous gaps in the prosecution's case, Musila was acquitted of Chelele's murder. While Musila was sentenced to 30 years for killing Yego, it remains evident that he had some involvement in Chelele's murder, and he should have been held accountable for her gruesome death as well. In this case, we continue to see a disturbing pattern where an abusive and acrimonious partner lures their ex, leading to a tragic and often brutal outcome. It serves as a reminder to exercise caution when meeting with an ex, particularly if there is a history of abuse. If meeting is absolutely necessary, ensure it takes place in a public setting and consider bringing someone along for added safety. Whenever possible, it may be best to avoid in-person meetings altogether. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Diana Chelele. May her soul continue to rest in eternal peace. Thank you for joining us today. If you appreciated this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be notified when the next video is up. Until then, please take care, stay safe, and always, always trust your gut.